If you have ever looked at an old black and white photograph from the 1800s, it can be easy to assume that people were miserable back then. After all, there's a distinct lack of smiles anywhere that you look. A family picture? No. How about a party? Still no. A wedding? Definitely not. Hence the assumption of misery. Or at least that our ancestors were much more serious than we are today. But of course, that wasn't the case at all. Those who lived in the 19th century were people just like us. They lived, they loved, and they had fun as people always have. So why the lack of smiles in old pictures? Today I seek to answer that question. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Historadame, and today we're learning all about why people never smile in old photos. Though smiling is the norm in pretty much every photo that we take today, during the 19th century there were a number of reasons why people chose not to smile. The initial reason was not actually a deliberate choice, but rather the result of a technical limitation. In the early days of photography, getting your picture taken wasn't as simple as it is with a modern camera. Photos required long exposure times, meaning that taking a single picture could last as long as a few minutes to a few hours. In fact, the oldest surviving photograph that we have, a landscape taken in 1826 titled View from the Window at Le Gras, had an exposure time of 8 hours. Getting a person to sit still and pose for that long would have been near impossible. But of course, such extremes were not the case for long, and a bit over a decade later, Louis Daguerre's daguerreotype photography had cut down the time to around 15 to 20 minutes. This made portrait photography a more realistic option, but even remaining still for that amount of time can be difficult, especially if you're holding a smile. Even just trying to smile for a photo today can result in a horrible grimace if you do it for too long. And in order to get a clear photograph, everybody has to be completely still, or else your picture ends up blurry. It was because of this reason that there were strict rules when it came to posing for photos. Photography studios would direct subjects to stay in simple poses with very serious facial expressions, so as not to risk the quality of their picture. So, case closed. People didn't smile because photography took so long, right? Well, not exactly. As technology advanced, exposure times got shorter and shorter, until by the mid-1800s, taking a picture could now be done in under a minute, which meant that smiling was feasible. And yet, people still weren't doing it. Why not? Well, it turns out there were more than just technical reasons. A huge factor as to why people didn't smile in photos is that we simply had a different social attitude towards photography as a whole. Before cameras, the only way to get your likeness preserved was by commissioning a portrait, something which was very expensive and would take many hours to complete. Having a portrait of yourself painted was a symbol of wealth and status, and as a result was treated with a certain level of seriousness. A portrait was meant to look regal and fancy, not like you were having fun. The social attitude towards smiling in portraits was actually rather negative, since wide grins were associated with madness, drunkenness, or perversion, and no one wants to look like a crazy drunk pervert. Many early photographs followed this same philosophy, with formal dress, rigid posture, and smiling highly discouraged. One also has to keep in mind that photography wasn't as common as it is today. In the early days, it was incredibly expensive, and could cost up to 3 or more months of the average person's salary, so you really didn't want to risk messing up a picture. Most people were only photographed once in their lives, and some didn't even get around to it until after they died. In cases like this, people would partake in the practice of post-mortem photography, where photos would be taken after a person's death in order to preserve their likeness. The corpse would be dressed up and posed as though they were still alive, sometimes with other members of the family standing around them, as though it was just totally a normal photo. Nothing to see here, folks. Just ignore that dead body. It's actually pretty easy to tell who the corpse is in these kind of photos, since they're in perfect focus and everyone else is slightly blurry. As you can imagine, if you're already grieving and then you have to take a picture standing next to your recently deceased family member, you wouldn't exactly be in a smiling mood. And if that wasn't terrifying enough, the entire vibe of photography studios during the early to mid-1800s could be rather frightening for people. The first of their kind were even referred to as operation rooms, which definitely wouldn't set someone at ease who had never taken a picture before. To make matters even worse, some studios also used hidden neck braces or restraints in order to keep subjects still for the long exposure times. So if you've never encountered a camera before, and now all of a sudden you're in the operation room, standing next to your dead relative and wearing a weird neck brace, you're allowed to be a little uncomfortable. So there we have it, right? People didn't smile in old photos because it took a long time, it was kind of scary, and they were really serious about it. But what about when people did smile in photographs? I know, I just spent this whole video telling you why it didn't happen. But people have always been people. We like to fool around, make jokes, throw up a set of bunny ears behind our friend's head, and the Victorians were no different. Though they are not as common, there are photos of people from the 1800s just having fun. Here we have a set of 4 photographs where a couple just couldn't sit still because they kept laughing. Or some people making funny faces, just because they could. A group of teenage girls taking a silly picture at the beach. 2 couples partaking in a popular comedic dance at the time, known as the cakewalk. Tsar Nicholas II goofing off with his friends. This woman who was really into this dude's flirting. And this woman who was definitely swiping left. These 3 students at Yale who decided to dress as women for the day. A couple having a pillow fight. This family who invented the awkward family photo long before they became popular. Tsar Nicholas back at it again. 2 women building a very impressive snow sculpture. And here we have my personal favorite, a 4-part series, featuring a happy home. Then the mother-in-law comes to visit. An argument ensues. The mother-in-law leaves. How about this photograph, where we can see all the joys of family life? Or the timeless cat photo? And of course, people smiling. Because they did. They smiled, laughed, and loved just like we do. Because we always have, and we always will. Hey everyone, thank you for watching! I'm really curious to know which one of these fun Victorian photos you guys liked the best, so let me know down in the comments. If you want to see more content like this, you can also subscribe to my channel, and keep up to date on all the fun history videos of the future. But for now, I bid you farewell.